Welcome to another episode of Foreign Correspondents Deeper into Hitchcock podcast. My name is Michał Oleszczyk and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host
Sebastian Smoliński. Hello, everyone.
Believe it or not, this is the 19th installment of our podcast in which we discuss Alfred Hitchcock's filmography film by film. And we are very excited to continue this project. We are happy that you are listening. And today we are following our last episode with a discussion of Sabotage, a film that premiered in December 1936 and which was based on Joseph Conrad's Secret Agent, a novel that inspired the film. It was really more of an inspiration than a direct basis, but we will discuss this as well. And we are slowly but surely moving our way through Hitchcock's filmography. Last time I wasn't too happy about Secret Agent, which was based on Somerset Maugham stories, but now I have to say that despite its many flaws, I am rather fond of Sabotage. What was your impression of this film, which stars Sylvia Sidney and Oskar Homolka in the main roles?
Definitely, I need to ask you about these flaws a bit later. But yes, among our recent rewatches, the movie we both of us rewatched for this podcast, this was my favorite. I really enjoyed coming back to this movie. I also enjoyed reading Joseph Conrad for the first time, actually. You are right that it's more inspired by this book than an adaptation of this book, but still, I think in the crucial sequences, we can feel this Conrad touch in a way, which is also interesting because it seems not really compatible with Hitchcock aesthetic and style. But yes, I think it really holds up very well, and I think it's one of my favorite among his British movies. And a movie which is, I would say, it gives us some fresh air after these three movies that are more or less, I mean, you can say the one is the sequel to another, or Evil Twin, as you mentioned last time, right? I mean, The Man Who Knew Too Much, The 39 Steps, and Secret Agent, they all follow the same formula, but this one is like more of a chamber piece, which I really liked. I enjoyed the intimacy of this movie. And also, I enjoyed the changes that Hitchcock made in Conrad when we compare it with the Conrad text. And generally, I think many things work here. So maybe let's start with that. What did you like the most about it?
Yes, what did I like? I like the brevity of it. It's one of the shortest of Hitchcock films. It's 74 minutes long. It's quite intense. It doesn't have this sort of thick philosophical intensity that the Joseph Conrad novel has. And I read it about 15 years ago, so the only thing I think I remember, and I read it in Polish translation, was that it's a very slow read, very difficult read, and slowly, as if it's emerging, like what is it about, like very, very slowly. It crystallizes and it takes forever, but it was fascinating read. I remember that much. However, here we have a story that's brisk, relatively uncomplicated, and besides a story that, what I like is that immediately clues you in as to who is who. I mean, we know exactly who is the saboteur, and what are the relationships within the character. And really, the film, I think, is, for me, is built on observation of the Sylvia Sidney character, because we know so much more than she does. And she has this very, very strange beauty about her, those heavy eyelids, full lips. I always found her, type of beauty quite odd, actually. And, just to watch her, this very frail and a little bit mysterious woman. And, we know that she's actually, with someone who is very, very dangerous, Verloc, the character of Oskar Homolka. And this movie has one of the most, devastating scenes in all of Hitchcock for me. This is, of course, the sequence at the cinema when she's watching the Walt Disney cartoon Who Killed Cock Robin, because I think this scene really touches upon what Hitchcock is about, and this figure of disillusionment, this figure of sudden realization that there is evil in this world, that there are people who wish you harm. And the moment when she's laughing at the cartoon and suddenly she sees the violence in the cartoon, and she doesn't want to laugh anymore because she knows now that the small boy is dead. She knows that there is real violence in the world and that it's impossible to contain, that it's very vicious, that it's shape shifting. And I love the scene because I love this whole camera movement when Sylvia Sidney comes into the theater and we see this very innocuous cartoon. There are the children watching it, and we are slowly immersing ourselves in the movie house, which is basically what Hitchcock is all about, because this is how we perceive his movies. And the change on her face, I think, is the very essence of this sudden realization that there is this chaotic, evil, violent element in this world. I always think, like, once her face goes slack and her eyes are empty and she is looking at the screen, it's exactly the same stare that I think the actress, I forget her name, that the rape victim has in Frenzy after she's raped. And she's basically, actually, while she's being raped, she has this vacant look. She's praying in Frenzy, and she's like, this look says something very, very deep about Hitchcock characters. That there's, once you are touched by violence, once you become the victim of violence, once you become the victim of the chaotic element in the world, you will never be the same. And there are moments in Hitchcock when this one look, and of course this also Scotty's look in Vertigo, and of many, many, many characters, that this veil is sort of torn from your eyes and you see the world for what it is, an imperfect place. So this is my reason for the movie, that I love this character of Sylvia Sidney and her whole journey from relative innocence to this sudden bitter knowledge about the world.
It's a fascinating reading of this really beautiful scene. I agree. You mentioned James Stewart characters who also have this look, but I would say there is something very specific to Hitchcock's female characters, to the way he portrays women in the 1940s, but also in his British period. And the way he finds in women characters, he finds these vessels, to convey what you said, to convey this horror of the world and this, as you mentioned beautifully, the sudden realization that there is some real danger and real horror. Yes, I would say it's probably the key sequence in the movie. It's a bit less celebrated than the two famous ones, the one with a bomb in a bus, which of course was very heavily debated and controversial. I think we'll come back to that, and the other one with the knife, of course, famously. But yes, this one, what struck me as well, besides the way Hitchcock directed Sylvia Sidney and the way she plays in this scene. Also, it's then I realized it's not that common for Hitchcock to include these very direct self-referential elements. Of course, Rear Window, we have a photographer in Rear Window, but basically when you think about Hitchcock movies, there are not, I think, that many scenes which are played in theaters. For a director who was, in a way, he was cinephile, he was obsessed with the mechanics of movies, but this is one of the few cases when there is really such a direct representation of a screening room. And but it's not the only one. What is interesting, is that this movie is in a way constructed of these screens. So Hitchcock tries to convey visually the emotional state, and of course this scene is the more subtle and more poignant, I would say. But also the moment when Oscar Homolka's character realizes that he will have to do something bad, that he will have to blow up something in London, then suddenly he looks at this aquarium, at this glass, and he sees there's the image is changing, and he sees the London kind of dissolving, which is, for me, is a bit uncanny because it looks like a nuclear bomb effect. Actually, that's what we associate, I would say, with these images of nuclear holocaust, and it's happening there in 1936. So it's a visual effect which I think gets some additional sense in contemporary times. But yes, so that's another screen, and there are a few more. There are this movie is full of these screens which are somehow corresponding with what's going on. Of course, in this case, what is fascinating is that Hitchcock uses Walt Disney, right? It's another element of this, we could say, this perverse orchestration of the whole thing, that she's not watching some cruel movie, but she's watching this cartoon, and suddenly this death in the cartoon, because there's this question, who killed this Robin, right? But suddenly this question is not only like this question for entertainment. Like it's not made funny or laughable, but it's really real for her. The death is really real for her, and also that's, on a more simple level, I would say the scene is also about the fact that sometimes entertainment may be not enough for you. That's on this most simple level. She cannot really indulge in the screening at the theater. She needs to move into action. So we have this strange interplay, because within a movie we see that maybe in this case just watching images is not enough. She needs to take some real action.
Yeah, and it's definitely a strange meeting between two of the greatest entertainers of the 20th century, Walt Disney and Alfred Hitchcock. Probably, Chaplin should join them. I fully agree. I think that, if we remember also what Charles Barr mentions, that Hitchcock, of course, grew up in a grocery store, very much like the one in the film. This sort of, an apartment connected to the grocery store, and with this, small private business, and this strange figure of Oscar Homolka, who is this basically, sinister husband. I mean, he seems very warm and avuncular on the outside, but he's also, there's something sinister to him. I mean, it's almost unimaginable, how they matched, why they are together. It's so strange. But I agree with those portrayals of women. There's, of course, the traumatic moments that we mentioned. Annie Ondra in Blackmail after the rape murder scene, and crucially Doris Day in Men Who Knew Too Much, the moment when James Stewart gives her the pill, the sedative, before he breaks the big news to her. I think Hitchcock was so attuned to this moment of violation. It's incredible, and it's also disturbing, because Marnie will be basically almost a celebration of violation, but we'll get there. Well, here I agree with you. It's fascinating moment when she's watching the cartoon, and also I think it's not only that the entertainment is not enough. I think that she, for the first time, she sees the entertainment for what it is. Because as we know, Walt Disney also had some strange views about the world, and some very reactionary views, some very prejudiced views. He had also some sexual hang-ups that are visible in his films, almost like Hitchcock. So it's one entertainer is showing another in a way that sort of punctures this veil of innocuous entertainment. It's almost like Hitchcock is saying there is no such thing as innocuous. It's always, there's something evil lurking there, but
behind the screen, literally.
Yes, behind the screen. So that's fun. I love the scene with the knife. It's a really beautiful merging of intimacy and, again, violence. As in Hitchcock, it's beautifully cut. My problem with the film probably is that, apart from this relationship, like, I don't really care about the investigation, the little boy also. I mean, I'm not a big fan of this whole bomb thing, of how Hitchcock teases the audience by prolonging the moment. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious that he wants us to suffer, that he wants us to shout, to say it's pure Hitchcock. I mean, you love it or hate it.
It's
yes.
Too cheap or too obscene in this case?
I think it's all too obscene. I mean, he simply, it's sleazy. It's really sleazy, the way he does it. There is no veil. There is no pretending that it's something else. It's exactly this. It's applying violence to you, and you can take it or leave it. And he's grinning as he's doing it. So, but yeah, this is Hitchcock. This is what he does.
But I must say, because the scene is so controversial, and it also it has its own history of reception. There was a woman critic, actually, right? C.A. Lejeune. She was a fan of Hitchcock in the 1930s in Great Britain, but she panned. I mean, she didn't like Sabotage. It was a bit like a. This anecdote is like Pauline Kael was there, right? Because this critic, this Lejeune, she went out of the screening room and started to kind of almost beat up Hitchcock, like in his chest, saying you couldn't do that. I mean, it should not have been done because it's so obscene or sleazy or masochistic in a way, or sadistic rather. But also when I revisited this scene, I immediately thought about small scene in John Carpenter's breakthrough movie Assault on Precinct 13. And of course, it's a completely different situation, because I think what makes the sabotage sequence so problematic is that we are emotionally invested in this boy, even if we don't like him. But we spend so much time with him that, as you say, we know what will happen, and we're just waiting for that. But still, we kind of cannot believe that. And in Assault on Precinct 13, there is this very short scene in one of the first scenes in the movie when just one of the thugs, he just kills the
small girl licking ice cream.
Exactly, licking ice cream. So we have, the level of this perversity of violence is also very high. But she's just half anonymous girl. We just see her for like 60 seconds. But still, I think that scene was striking, and that scene in Carpenter's movie kind of heralded this new sensibility. The sensibility and the frame of mind in which you can say that everything's allowed, and this level of violence is allowed. And so I'm not trying to defend the sabotage scene, but I think about, this scene as one of these elements also of Hitchcock's glory of pushing the boundaries. I'm thinking about Psycho, right? Of course, it's the most celebrated example. I mean, there was something in his movies, there were these moments when he really tried to push the boundary. And of course, the boundaries he pushed in Psycho were celebrated. People loved it. There was no such a problem with showing the such a sadistic murder. It's as sadistic as in Sabotage, but of course we have a little boy. But what Hitchcock did, maybe it will be interesting for our listeners, what he changed in relation to the novel. Of course, the novel has many more characters. It's much more about, let's say, conspiracy, foreign embassies, the society of anarchists. It's much more about that. And there is this domestic plot. The movie is mostly about this domestic plot, but in the novel, the wife of the Mrs. Verloc, she doesn't know what her husband is doing, but she realizes he's probably doing something not really legal. I mean, there is this Conrad really cues us to that she knows there's something going on, but she has this personality that she doesn't want to know. She doesn't ask him. She's not interested. She's oblivious, but she's kind of an accomplice in the novel. In the movie, Sylvia Sidney character, she's constructed as this totally innocent wife and sister. That's one thing. And of course, in the novel, what is really, and that also shows you what you can do in a novel and what you couldn't do in movies. I mean, of course, the level of obscenity and violence in novels was much bigger, of course, then and even now, I would say. In the novel, this boy, Stevie, he's not the smartest boy, and he's mentally challenged. I think that's what we could say. So it's even a bigger play on our emotions, that this poor boy who's not very smart and cannot really cope with life like adult person, that he's killed by accident, because he trips, when he's planning to put this bomb next to the Greenwich Village Observatory. So that's what we have in the novel, and in the movie, Stevie is just a regular boy and really a bit clumsy, but funny, quite pretty. So these are these changes that I think Hitchcock made to make this narrative more mainstream, more acceptable, more that we could identify easier with the characters. So of course, one more thing I want to say about Conrad is that it's really strange that he's adapting such a high literature. It didn't happen very often, and I would say these are two different worlds. I mean, this novel, as you mentioned, it's a really hard read. It gives us back our time. I would say it's a rewarding experience, but it's not a book that you would associate with Hitchcock in the first place.
Well, first of all, we need to give a little tip of a hat to our compatriot, Joseph Conrad, because he was Polish and he was writing his novels in English, just like we are Polish and we are doing this podcast in English. Yeah, but Hitchcock knew what he was doing, and in Carpenter film, and by the way, Carpenter was heavily influenced by Hitchcock, of course. He named one of the characters in Halloween Sam Loomis, actually, after Psycho. So what Carpenter does in Assault of Precinct 13 when he kills off this little girl licking ice cream, I think it's much more honest than what Hitchcock does in Sabotage. Because what Carpenter is doing is basically he's taking this to extreme. It's like Psycho in 40 seconds. Basically that you see this girl, you think, oh, she cannot be killed off, and yes, she will be killed off in 30 seconds. Hitchcock was so. I mean, there is this part of his persona. And of course, it's part of the fascination that we have for him. For me, he's at his highest when he conveys a little bit of the horror that he experienced at the world, let's say, his genuine horror. But I think that he is at his absolute lowest when he resembles this sleazy uncle that slips you a pornographic picture when you're a kid and grins at you looking at your reaction. And I think that Hitchcock has this side to him. It's someone who is doing the dirty joke, and he's just looking for you to react. He's looking at you to flinch. And I think that's exactly what he's doing in the scene with the little boy. Like he is the dirty uncle who basically tells you a joke that you shouldn't hear at a certain age, and he looks at your reaction, and he knows that on some level, I'm not talking about sexual misconduct, I'm talking about some level of psychic violation, that he finds this place within the viewer that is very, very vulnerable, and then he squeezes it and he looks at you, and it's like he wants to see you react. He knows what he's doing. The boy is very sweet. He's this sort of English lad, like very chirpy, happy, and the chirpier and happier he is during this long sequence when he's looking at the experiment and he's on the bus, the bigger fun Hitchcock has. Had he inserted one shot of this boy looking pensively outside of the window, or had he inserted one shot of this boy that would give us the indication that he's actually a deeper character, like a boy who thinks about the world or has maybe a sad side to him. No, but he knows exactly what he's doing. He wants to make him as cute as possible, just to have this moment of our shock when the bomb goes off. So I'm put off by this. I don't like this at all. But I also know that this was probably the price that Hitchcock was paying for having such a close affinity with those very troublesome areas of our mind, that he was absolutely masterful at exploring. So I cannot protest, because he is the master of exploring very dark sides of humanity, and one of those sides happens to be quite sleazy and off-putting, but this is the price of admission that I'm willing to pay, to have this full tour of Hitchcock's sensibility. But no, I hate the bomb scene, and I take pride in my hatred of the bomb scene.
That's very interesting, because it also shows, I mean, in your case, that it doesn't really mean that was something excessive in the 1930s. From the point of view that you are kind of sharing with us, it's still inappropriate, even though we have, this exploitation cinema, and maybe because of that, maybe because it's not an exploitative movie, maybe because it's a domestic drama, maybe that's why this bus scene is so difficult to swallow. And I understand your point totally. I would just defend it on the grounds that, I agree with what you said about Hitchcock sometimes going at his lowest. I think it happens in his British movies more often. When he comes to Rebecca, he's really, I mean, you can feel from the opening scene of Rebecca, you sense the master, right? The long traveling shot and the whole decor of the movie and everything. He's a master now, and his 1940s is a interesting decade in his career, and I think there are less and less this kind of also stupid jokes that we find in his movies. For example, these pieces of dialogue which kind of tell us in this ambiguous ways that, for example, the boy has these inflammable cans with film, and the policeman, I think in a bus, he's saying, "Oh no, you will burn us," right? And that's exactly what happens. So you can say that this kind of dialogue is also another part or another joke on screenwriter's part, and maybe it's not the best one. So I think it kind of disappears from his movies in a way. They don't stop to be perverse or scary or unsettling, but there is no this kind of checking what will be okay and what won't be okay, right? I mean, Peter Lorre, what can he do in a movie, right? You were also put off by his behavior in Secret Agent. I think that's, that maybe he wasn't sure, artistically what's okay and what's not. Maybe there's maybe he was not empathetic enough. I don't know.
Well, I think that, having arrived at, Puritan America, he knew that he needed to be cleaner and more respectable, more tasteful in a way. And those American films are more tasteful in many ways until they aren't. And until, there's Psycho that basically explodes all of those pent up emotions and is an assault at the viewer. And then definitely Frenzy will be, the ultimate explosion of that. But, it's, I think, we live in such a sanitized culture, and in a culture that we, become so terrorized by moral growth that, I mean, art is supposed to, make you a better person, which is, so tedious. And that, nowadays we don't even have characters like Hitchcock. I mean, maybe Lars von Trier has those moments, when he pushes those buttons and he knows that he's pushing. But, Lars von Trier, it's been a while since he made a movie. I don't know what would be his next move. Anyhow, I would like to say...
He's cancelled anyway.
Well, not yet.
More or less.
No, not yet. Moving a little bit, I would say that you mentioned that the wife is completely innocent. I don't know. She's played by Sylvia Sidney, and this is such an... interesting choice. She's not like she's not Doris Day. She has this mystery about her. We don't really know what's going on there. But I think from the temperature of our discussion, it seems that Sabotage has still the power to provoke. I mean, after all those years, this scene is still controversial, and I think every time we witness destruction of innocence, basically, and this is what happens here. It touches a button,
It's interesting, but I don't know why, but I think your reasoning is really interesting, but still I cannot see why it's such a mistake, artistically speaking. I really don't feel that, and I don't know. I don't think that killing children is okay in movies, but we have also the stereotype of these evil children, right? Or recently there was this, I think, German horror movie by this duo of filmmakers. I forgot the title. Maybe we'll provide it in the on the fan page. But there are these figures, and I treat them more like this, maybe cinematic stereotypes or cliches. So okay, maybe it's too much, but still, I just cannot be morally repulsed by that. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe there's some problem with me as a viewer, but yeah, I think it's interesting that we kind of we don't agree on that part. For example, Charles Barr kind of skips that. He says that he doesn't agree with Hitchcock that it was a mistake. That it was essential in the novel, but once again, of course, these are two totally different realms. I mean, you can describe something, and I would say Conrad is also a kind of a sadistic writer. I mean, what you described, that this novel is a, let's say, classic slow burner. It's really developing very slow, and the scene, the 20-something pages in which Mrs. Verloc realizes she wants to kill her husband, and she's doing that in an almost like a psycho way. I mean, the knife is up, the knife goes down, right? That's what happens in the book. Here we have a more ambiguous killing, right? I mean, he's almost like killing himself. She almost doesn't know what's happening, so it's softened. And I would say that I was more disturbed by the novel than by the Hitchcock rendition.
Well, whatever you say about Conrad, he doesn't deny complexity to any of his characters, and I think that Hitchcock very he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's denying the boy any complexity. The boy is supposed to be innocent. He's supposed to be as nice as possible, just to heighten the shock of the explosion, I think. And I'm not condemning him. I'm just saying that I can see what he's doing.
In the novel, the boy was a so-called simpleton.
Well, but that is part of the characterization. Then we learn that he's a simpleton, right? About this boy, I don't know anything. Okay. Basically, he's cheerful young boy, and there is no such thing as cheerful young boy. There are different kind of boys. And anyhow, I'm not saying, I'm not condemning it. I'm just saying that I'm seeing what Hitchcock is doing, and And that's it. But basically, I see the rabbit, being pulled out of the hat, and
And you don't like this trick.
no, I don't like it. I don't like it. But he has the right to do it, and I would never deny him the right to do this trick on me. So anyhow, I would say also that this film, definitely hints at those very complex themes in Hitchcock. It's not, I think, an innocent film. It's not Rich and Strange. It's not 39 Steps, which as we said was also quite complex, but at least there wasn't this dark element in any of the characters. So I would say that yes, I can definitely sense some of the most serious Hitchcocks here, and his side, and we are slowly but surely coming to some very, very exciting moments in his career, especially the transition across the pond. So we'll see how he handles that. But yes, part of the interesting is that he will never again adapt literature that would be so high in cultural ranking. This is the only stab that he had at, let's say, a masterpiece. So for that reason, it's interesting.
And I would also add that it's the few movies we discussed recently, of course, beginning with The Man Who Knew Too Much. These are these famous Hitchcock classics that started something, The Man Who Knew Too Much started a formula. The 39 Steps started another sub-formula, let's say, and so on. And here I had this feeling that, as I mentioned, that it's a chamber piece almost. It's quite intimate. Also, the killing is intimate, the killing of Mr. Verloc. So I would say it's the first of these all Hitchcocks, of these 19 movies, I think, that we've discussed so far, that has this element that will really reappear in his very psychologically intense American movies. And I think that's a good thing. I liked it. I was really swept by this movie in some parts. But also I want to note that Romer and Chabrol, they hated this movie, and they said that Hitchcock did it that it's very contrived, that it's very done on purpose to show that he is this kind of filmmaker that people are describing that he is, that it was movie made to cater to the critics, to satisfy the public that thought they know Hitchcock already, that it's like this movie is like a synthesized Hitchcock. I didn't have this feeling.
No, me neither, but then I rarely understand the French. So, so yeah, I think this is basically what I had to say, and I think that we can slowly wrap up the discussion. And if there's there anything you want like to add?
Yeah, just the last thing I want to ask you and maybe our listeners, if you had this feeling that we know that Guillermo del Toro is a Hitchcock fan. We discussed it when we were discussing The Man Who Knew Too Much. But when I was rewatching Sabotage, I had this feeling that he really borrowed a lot in case of Shape of Water. I tried to Google that, but I didn't find any articles about it. I mean, maybe he mentioned it in one or the other interview. But in Shape of Water, The Shape of Water, there is, of course, there's the old theater. There is a character, and she's a bit different. Maybe not like Stevie, but she's I think she's a mute woman. Sally Hawkins plays her, and so we have this visual association of house and the theater, which is like in the same building. We have water and aquariums, similarly to Sabotage. Of course, I'm not trying to build like this cohesive interpretation that maybe Shape of Water has so much to do with that, but I think maybe because Del Toro is such a fan, maybe some visual elements, and we know that he liked British period in Hitchcock movies, maybe some elements are there. So I couldn't help thinking about it. Of course, when I was watching Shape of Water, I didn't think about Hitchcock, but when I was watching Hitchcock, I thought about Del Toro.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if actually he had this in mind. Well, maybe he will listen to the podcast. Thank you again for a wonderful discussion, and thank you, our listeners, for listening to this podcast, Foreign Correspondents Deeper into Hitchcock. We have our fan page on Facebook. We definitely encourage you to share our podcast. We are preparing some very special episodes with very special guests. One episode will be super exciting, and it will be coming soon, so stay tuned, and please share the news about this podcast. It's really important for us to reach new Hitchcock fans. So here we are closing the 19th episode of Foreign Correspondents.
Deeper into Hitchcock.